Once you've ruled out the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true.
And it is not a question of a little occultism or a touch of mysticism, Mr. Denton. It is vampirism, and there's a host of damned souls of Pelham House.
I am thy father's spirit, doomed for a certain term to walk the night.
Here, the old gods aren't dead.
And what of the true God?
He's dead. Can't complain.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
You're listening to Paranormal UK Radio.
Welcome to Paranormal UK Radio. I'm your host, Irene Allen Block, and tonight we're bringing you a show from our usual pub, the Cock and Bawls. With me tonight is Mark Johnson, my co-host as usual. We have Andrew Chaplin, Brian Bowden.
Hello.
El Santariga.
Wow, good one, Irene.
Ah, yeah, and that took some practice. And Andy Mercer.
Good evening.
We're all in the pub, we're all having a drink, and Mark's paying, so let's
hang on, here I brought the points, so here, let me hand it out to everybody. So, Guinness over here, gin and tonic here.
You got my Prosecco?
I got your Prosecco right here, love. There you go.
All right, fine. So everyone's got their drinks now. Did everyone have a nice Christmas and a Happy New Year?
Bar humbug.
Yeah.
Very well.
I concur with Scrooge.
Was there plenty of spirits flowing? This is the point. Was there plenty of spirits flowing?
Here, I'm just happy that 2016 went down in flames just like Mariah Carey's career.
Oh my God.
and soon to be Obama's as well.
Oh, God.
Who will be remembered for chucking out 35 Russian diplomats. Well done, Obama. Almost World War III, but hey-ho.
No, we've got Trump for that.
Oh, Hillary would be worse, trust me. Hillary would be far worse. She pledged to invade Iran in 2008. She said, if I was going to become president, I want the Iranians to know that I would invade Iran. Russia and China back Iran. That would be World War III. So... Well, I think Trump actually gets on with Putin, so I'm kind of more positive than if Hillary got in.
You mean Trump can be manipulated by Putin? Yeah, good stuff. Good idea.
Well, I don't think. Well, Hillary would go head to head.
I'm trying to talk here.
Yeah, but it's
not a political show. It's a paranormal show.
No,
damn it!
He started it. It's a pub. What do you expect?
Although maybe we'll get into it later when we're all pissed.
I just want to say, it was on the news over here with my what's her name in New York. What's her name? I can't even pronounce it. What is it?
I don't know. There's a couple of people in New York. So
the one that was doing the New York New Year at New York, and she froze.
Oh, Mariah Carey. Yeah,
she couldn't get her lips in sync.
Are you talking about a pop concert? What are you talking about, Irene?
It was the New Year's Eve, the big New Year's Eve celebration. They broadcast from Times Square. They bring in celebrities to sing. They brought in Mariah Carey, and if you haven't seen it, go to YouTube. It was the most absolutely disastrous performance of all time because she couldn't lip sync when instead of freaking singing. What's wrong with singing these days? No, the lip sync thing wasn't set up right, and then she spent her whole performance complaining about it and blaming everybody else.
She walked off, didn't she?
Pardon?
She walked off in the end, didn't she?
You know what? I didn't even watch that far. I was laughing too much, and then I realized I don't like her anyway, and I shut it off. But yeah, she just totally killed her career right there.
Oops.
Lord.
Who was it who led us in? It was Robbie, wasn't it?
Yeah, so forced to watch that. No, he was dreadful. It was almost as bad. He didn't sing half the time. He kept waving the microphone at the audience for them to sing for him, to save him doing the job. And he was out of tune in a couple of his own songs. He was pretty dreadful as well.
And was that coming from inside a church, Andy?
I don't know where the hell. Oh, actually, a friend of mine was there. He got free tickets. Long
and
story.
It looked like it was inside a church, and there was all those women with hardly any clothes on bouncing around on the stage.
Oh, that sounds like a church to me. So.
Disrespectful.
So now we're into religion, okay?
Yeah. 5 weeks into the show, done politics and religion.
Anyway, I've got to tell everybody in the whole world what I got for Christmas.
Was it a sack of coal?
That's
like
what she
every other year.
deserved.
I got for Christmas, and she may make an appearance with a bit of a snorty noise later on if I'm careful. Because if anybody hears any snoring or snorting going on in the background, it's my little piggy. What I actually got for Christmas was an English bulldog, like Winston Churchill had.
Very nice.
Her name's Gertrude, and she is a little terror. She doesn't mind attacking the guard dogs at all. You know, she has them crumbled in the corner in fear. No, she's a little fat thing, and she's lovely. Absolutely lovely.
If you really want her to get her to cower, put her in with Pickles Pee-wee.
Yeah. Anyway, anyone wanting to see her, there's pictures of her on my Facebook page.
I seen her. Irene, she's beautiful.
She is, isn't she?
Yes, she is.
Gorgeous.
Is she an ankle biter? Is she an ankle biter?
Well,
Savage, probably.
yeah, she is an ankle biter and just about everything else at the moment. I've got to get that out. Yeah, I'll tell you a story about that later, Andrew.
So the postman has got to be even more careful than he normally is.
The postman, he won't come to this house.
I don't blame him.
Get eaten alive.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Again,
true.
between guard dogs and pickles.
The postman foolishly jumped the fence one day to take a shortcut into the drive. And then I had my bull mastiff, Willow, who passed away 4 years this Christmas. And she was out in the drive. And I've never seen a man fly over a fence like he did. Honest to God, he would have been great in the Olympics.
It's a bull mastiff. I would have been running too.
Should be a new Olympic sport. Champion dog chased by.
Anyway, so everyone's had a nice Christmas, have they?
Yes. Nice.
Irene, did any apparitions make themselves known to you over Christmas?
No, but a pile of money that I've had. My grandson went up the park. My little grandson is 2 years old, and an old man who's Welsh, obviously, because we live in Wales, he stopped and he chatted with him and one thing and another, and he gave him some money, silver, out of his pocket.
Yeah.
Old age pensioner he was, which I thought was really great. I think it was £1.80 he gave him, and apparently that's custom here. So he brought it back, and I put it into a little plastic bag for him to take home with him. It disappeared.
Oh.
It literally disappeared off of my island in the kitchen, and it reappeared on the island in the kitchen today.
Oh.
Wow.
So how many days was it in...
Very keen, I don't know.
So how many days totally was it in limbo?
A couple of days, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Herbert's having a go at you.
Did they pay any interest?
Yeah, that'd be good, wouldn't it? That'd be brilliant, actually. You come back with those £2 there instead.
Yeah, look, it's £2 now.
Hey.
Oh, well. It's now gone to London. The money's now gone to London, and it'll be put in his piggy bank in the morning.
There you go.
Yeah, hopefully. Right, so what we're going to talk about today, is...
Well, to start...
This is a paranormal show.
Yeah, to start us off, we have this week, all of our paranormal shows are coming back, and we have some new premieres. And,
Five new shows coming out this month.
Yes.
Good Lord.
So let's go down the list a bit and mention, the shows as they come now. Andrew, the show that you and Neil are doing, can you just talk a little bit about that real quick?
Yep. Basically, we're doing the Paranormal Peep Show, and we're kind of still in the process of deciding how long it's going to be and how many times per month it's going to be. This is very much going to be kind of shift permitting with Neil and myself, but we're going to try and maybe do at least 2 a month. We've already got some guests lined up. We're hoping Tony Topping might come on, Philip Kinsella, a couple of others. Neil is already very well connected within the kind of like paranormal psychic arena, and obviously with his High Wycombe Paranormal meetup, so he's already got quite a few connections, and I'm going to kind of see what I can do my end. So yeah, should be interesting.
Now,
and certainly
when
kind
you
of like
bring Tony
January
on
this month is when it's going to start kicking off.
Now, when you bring Tony on, are you going to have a translator?
Some very nefarious and mischievous goings on.
Tony, if you're listening, we love you. I'm just having a go at you here.
We do love you, Tony.
Well, that's great. So we're going to be looking forward to that. Now, Andy, we also have your show that you're doing with
Eric.
Indeed, we are carrying on. Ronald and I, we have just recorded our second show, which I'm in the process of editing together because we do waffle and talk and talk and talk. So hopefully we're going to go to once a fortnight within the next sort of month or so because we both think we've got enough material to talk about. As I say, sometimes it's just the two of us talking about a topic, which is what our next two shows are going to be. And we've got a guest lined up a little bit later in the year talking about the Yeti and what it was snowman. And we're going to take it from there, really. Beyond that, we haven't really sure what we're doing. But we've both discovered we can talk and talk and talk. So we just kind of ramble on for a couple of hours and see where it takes us. So.
And Andy,
what's the name of your... The first part of it is on Jack the Ripper, part 1, which we're talking about the actual murders themselves. And then our next show will be part 2, is on all the various theories and all the proposed suspects and the paranormal angle as well. As someone was saying to me, what's paranormal about Jack the Ripper, where there are some definite ghost stories. I can pick up a personal experience, but I know of others because I used to live in the area. So we are going to keep moving on with our kind of topic-based shows as well as guest-based shows.
And Andy, what's the name of your show again for the listening audience?
We are the Transatlantic Para Radio Show.
Excellent. And we've already had one episode air, and we'll have more coming up here soon. This month, we'll be posting on the website on the new schedule. And then also with Brian and Al, the two of you are also going to be doing your show here coming up soon. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. It's called Beyond the Realm. And it's everything you ever wanted to ask, but we're too afraid to. So we're going to be discussing a lot of the paranormal, anything and everything that comes up that some people are just pretty much scared to talk about or don't even want to believe in. Cryptids, poltergeist, Yeti, Sasquatch, you name it, we're there. We have a ton of guests. Al, you have lining up some guests for the show?
Yeah, I lined up about a half dozen guests already, and I'm working on more.
Yeah, we're going to do 2 hours a month, and it's a 2-hour show. Some of the shows we're just going to discuss general topics, and we're going to try to get some questions from some of the listeners to come in that they may want answered that never get to get answered previously with some of the guests that they've heard. So we're going to try to make it interactive in a way where everybody can get a little place to ask a question and get something back. It should be very interesting.
And with you, there's a lady, isn't there?
Yes. Sorry about that, Cindy. Cindy Bailey Dove, who also is our psychic for the Bronx Paranormal Society, will be joining us. And it's going to be a great dynamic. We all work really well with each other. And she's going to add her own perspective on drones. She does a drone report type of thing. And also add something from the psychic side of the equation.
And that's Cindy?
Yes. Cindy Bailey Dove. Yep.
Very good. Well, we're looking forward to all of this. This is going to be a great month. We also have a few other shows that will be premiering as well. We have
Ashley Nibbs and Graham Smith with their show.
You forgot the name of the show, didn't you?
Ghost Frequency.
Ghost Frequency. We also have, of course, Swamp Gas with Nathan Arizona is also playing on Wednesday nights after PA UK Radio. We also have coming up Inside the Goblin Universe with Ron Murphy and Colin
Schneider.
Yes. So, it's really turning in. This month is really exciting for us. So
another one, Spirit Talk.
Spirit Talk is Spirit Radio, which was also upcoming here soon. Again, we'll be adding all of these to the show calendar, so you can visit us at paukradio.com to see the latest updates and see the calendar and see who's going to be broadcasting when. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It certainly is. It certainly is. It's going to be also a lot of nightmares for us too. Trying to get these shows put out.
You wanted a network. You got it.
Yeah, it is my fault, isn't it?
Well, you know what? That's going to be okay because, in a year from now, people are going to be going coast to coast who?
Yes.
Exactly.
George,
We'll do
what
our
was
best
his?
to make sure that it's a streamlined show, so you don't have to worry too much about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
George, what's his name?
Yeah.
Newbie.
Nearly gone.
Nearly.
That's who George is.
Yeah.
It's George.
Nori.
Oh,
Nori.
oh, him.
And George, if you want to come on Beyond the Realm, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah. You know, when your career's over, you need something else to do. Sure.
Oh dear, you're awful, you lot.
Well, that's what happens. You get me in the pub and I start drinking.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's terrible.
So I don't know. Anyway, so did anything spooky happen to anyone over Christmas? You know, Christmas is always a spooky time.
Actually, yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Possibly
I remember
last
Andrew.
night.
Yeah, Andrew, you were mentioning this story last time we talked.
Oh no, this is a new one.
Oh, a new one.
Tell the first one, and then we'll
Yeah.
talk about the
Retell us
second.
the first one again, then we'll come back
Remind
into
me
it.
what the first one is.
Hmm?
Remind me what the first one is.
When you went into the shop with your friends and all the stuff
Oh, that one,
flying off
yeah.
the shelf.
Okay, so it's kind of like the last week of Christmas, and we were kind of like cramming in some shopping. Actually, it might have been the second from last. And we're in a very old city called St Albans, and we're in the kind of there was a kind of gift shop. I think it's called Tiger from memory. And we went in there, and I was with a very extremely psychic friend of mine called Indigo. And we were kind of like walking around. It's a bit like IKEA. You've got a certain route to go around, so you can't just browse how you want. It's like a certain route that you follow, and you get to the cash tills and pay. So we had a few gifts and getting ready to pay, and there was a candle section, and there was about 3 red candles just flew off the shelf. No one was near them. No one had touched them. They just flew off the shelf, and they didn't even drop or roll. They literally flew, and we kind of looked at each other. And we kind of had a fair guess what was going on. The staff looked kind of a bit worried and concerned, and they quickly ran over, picked the candles up, and then put them back on the shelf. But the look on their faces was kind of along the lines of, this happens all the time, but we're not supposed to talk about it. That was the kind of like, almost like a guilty look on their faces. And I asked them, is this shop haunted? And they said, yeah, all the shops in this part of town are haunted. So very, very interesting. And another thing that happened to Indigo recently, which isn't the second thing for me, but certainly for her, she was in the supermarket, and apparently some milk cartons just fell down by themselves as well. So this kind of like seems to be following us around for some reason. So there's that. Now the second thing actually happened last night, funnily enough. Now I go for walks quite regularly in my local area because there's a beautiful nature reserve, and there's kind of like a river, and there's a pathway, and it's great. Now there's this one particular place that's near a train level crossing, and apparently there was a suicide there. Somebody who kind of like stood in front of the train and got killed is the apparent thing that happened. I've been trying to kind of look up on the details of that, but can't find much. But I've always been a bit wary of that particular spot in case it is true, because I felt, what if there's something there that shows itself to me? And over the years doing the walks, nothing has shown itself to me, so I got a bit kind of like relaxed and kind of not worried too much about it. Well, last night I actually walked across the railway track, and I heard quite distinctly somebody say, "All right, mate," like that. And I looked, and there was no one there. No one there at all. I thought it might have been, maybe somebody on their mobile phone. Maybe it was someone out dogging. I don't know. But it was a case of, for the American visitors, by the way, dogging is where people make kind of meet up in car parks and stuff and have random sex with strangers, just in case our American audience isn't aware of that, which is certainly not the reason I was there, and it wasn't really a car park either. But no, there was no random flashing of headlights or indicators or anything. Everything was pitch black dark. There were some vehicles parked up, but they were all locked and all their lights were out. I couldn't see anybody there. And I kind of walked on fairly quickly, but yeah, very distinctly, and it wasn't in my mind either. It was kind of like external sound, and it was just.
So it was an AVP.
It was an EVP. It was an EVP.
No,
yeah.
an AVP, because you heard it.
Oh, an AVP.
AVP.
Audio.
What's the?
The audible voice phenomena.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, right, okay, I'm with you.
What would you? What I want to know, Andrew, is what would you have done if you'd seen anything?
I really don't know. I really don't. I've always said to Spirit that I don't particularly want to see something, but I suppose you have to be careful in what you stipulate, because I didn't see anything, I heard it. So it's almost like Spirit were going, okay, well, if you don't want to see it, then how about hear it? I mean, I've got another story similar to that. I don't know if you guys want to hear that, from a few years back.
Fire away.
It's quite a quick one, really, but I used to have somebody who lived in the next county in Essex, and I was driving back, and there was this particular little country lane, and I pulled over because I really needed a pee, and it was quite a dark little lane. Pulled up and basically kind of began to go in a bush, and I was thinking in my mind, I hope there's nobody around, so I was kind of looking up and down, and I swear I could hear voices coming towards me. Now, I wasn't thinking ghosts and apparitions. I was thinking either police or security, because it was kind of like the back end of like a big manor house type place. It was kind of like a private road, and I was thinking, oh my god, so they're going to turn up, they're going to have their torches, maybe dogs, and they're going to be wondering what I'm doing. And there was nothing, and it was kind of the voices were kind of half muffled, almost as if they're carried in the wind, and it was almost kind of like this. It was like, it's almost like there was a conversation between two people.
I call that astral chatter.
Yeah, it was like a conversation with two people. I couldn't work out what they were saying, and I kind of like finished what I was doing and then drove off. Now, a couple of weeks later, my scientific side decided, okay, I wonder if this is repeatable. I wonder if I can do this again, or it will happen again. So, sure enough, I went to visit my friend, came back home, and I deliberately pulled over. Another pee, as it happened. I haven't got massive bladder problems, by the way, but I just kind of like, I pulled over for that.
You enacted it then?
Yeah, and do you know what? It happened again. And I thought the odds on either like police or security or people being there twice randomly like that, I think are pretty remote. Bear in mind, this is a country lane in the middle of nowhere, and nothing actually turned up. There was no security, there was no flashlights, there was nothing. And it happened again. So I've had, audible things like that happen a few times.
Andrew, did you happen to record that second one?
This was actually the years before you could do that on mobile phones. Okay. So if you think kind of, this was around about, I would say 2001, 2002. So we're talking kind of mobiles that just about text and just about kind of call. So they didn't have voice recorders and all that kind of thing. But you know what? Maybe I'll go back. Maybe this year I'll go back and see if there's something.
Try it again.
Yeah.
Go have a pee.
Yeah. Well, I know.
Go have that pee.
Yeah.
Seems to be very successful for you.
The key elements of it, definitely.
Has anyone else had anything similar, minus the urination?
Yeah, I've been having a lot of this lately. A lot of the chatter. And I'm not the only one hearing it. My young ones are hearing it, and my wife, and they're taking note of it. And another good thing I've been having lately is there's something in my house that likes to touch my ear and my back of my ear, like they're petting or stroking me. And it's very noticeable. And when I tell them to stop, eventually they stop. But the chatter is kind of interesting because you can definitely hear it. And it's just above where you can kind of comprehend what they're saying, but it's a tad bit unnerving if you're by yourself.
Yeah.
But other than that, one of the mysterious things in my home is that my tablespoons went missing, and now they've returned. A majority of them returned, and they're again slowly went missing, so they're going missing again. I don't know what they need them for, but apparently they have some kind of jug band or something on the other side.
I swear something is upping. I swear something is upping, because the more I talk to people about this kind of thing, the more I'm hearing similar stories. Because when I first got into this, it was just a smattering of stories here and there. Now it's constant, and I'm getting emails from people because of the work that I do saying, this is going on, what do I do about it? Even from hardcore kind of skeptical people. It's mad. I mean, for instance, like I did like a clairvoyant night back in October 31st, funnily enough, driving back from Welling Garden City. Now I've always had kind of like lights go out and bulbs kind of like blow and things around me, but driving back from Welling, I counted 6 random street lights going out overhead, directly overhead, as I was driving back. And it wasn't like the banks, because at 12 o'clock, very often to save electricity and money, sometimes street lamps go out. But these were random individual lights in random locations amongst a group of them, and I counted them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I was getting a bit freaked out. I was thinking, at what point is the blue beam going to come down and the little greys start turning up?
Yeah, that's been happening a lot. Also, I'm able to do that quite often. It's not constant, but there are moments where it goes into like a burst, and for a couple of days or a week or a couple of months, I'll drive by, a light will go on or go off, which is pretty unnerving. Actually, we switched to LED bulbs, and it could be the bulbs. I haven't figured it out, but the scientific side is saying LED bulbs, but I'm getting flickering. It just comes on, and my kids freak out. It's doing it again. It's doing, and I yell it. I say, "Cut it out," and it kind of stops. So
that's
pretty.
On that.
Say again.
I can beat you two on that. I can blow up washing machines. Anything electrical running at the time I'm working will blow up.
And see, that comes in handy because when she gets tired of one, she just blows it up and then tells her husband, "Oh, look, it broke. I need a new one."
I need a new one.
I had something interesting happen to me the other day. I was having a conversation with a woman who's an empath, who I happened to know for many, many years, but never knew she was an empath. And I was sitting in my living room, and I'm talking to her on the phone, and the cat is sitting on the stereo. And I noticed all of a sudden my right arm started to get cold on my right side of my body. And I was wondering if there was a door open in the house or a window or something. And then I noticed that the cat was looking over my right shoulder. And I was thinking while I'm on the phone having a conversation with this woman, what the hell is this cat looking at? And all of a sudden this woman out of the clear blue sky says to me, your mother is there with you. And she goes on to describe my mother to a T, even the dress my mother was buried in. And she has no idea what my mom looks like. Even though we were friends, she was never over my house. I've never met my mother. And she said that your mother goes with you everywhere you go. Your mother's very attached to you. And I thought this was pretty crazy because, you know, our psychic for our team, Cindy, is an empath as well. And I've known her for 3 years now. And we've talked many, many times. And Cindy has never had that happen, or Cindy's never read me. And for this woman to just come out of the clear blue sky and say that to me just blew my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mark, have you got any stories?
Well, yeah, actually, I had something happen, and I want to preface this because it's what kind of made me do this. There's a video, and I posted it online. I think a couple of you saw it. There's this guy, he has a YouTube channel, and he goes around exploring abandoned mines. And he went through this one mine in California, and way back deep in the mine, he was just testing out this flashlight. And he's not a paranormal guy. And all of a sudden, these strange voices started coming through. And it's a lot like the astral chatter that you guys were just talking about. But in this video, you hear it. It's really, really loud. And it sounds like 3 or 4 voices all overlapping and talking, yet you can't really make out what they're saying. And, you know, this is something that's always interested me, especially the last year or so. I've been getting an interest in things that go on down in these mines and these caves. Now, I'm currently in Colorado Springs, and on the outskirts of Colorado Springs, above Manitou Springs, there's a cave system up here that's open to the public. They do tours. It's called Cave of the Winds. And so day after Christmas, I went in there to take a look at it. I took the lantern tour because they take you way back farther than they usually do. And they tell you ghost stories, and it's all by lantern light. I figured, okay, great. We'll get to go in and do this just to check it out and have fun. And but I did take my digital recorder with me. And we took the tour, and I didn't really feel a lot. I heard some of the ghost stories they talked about. Supposedly the caves are haunted by the former owner and his wife, and there's a story about these kids who used to work in the mine back in the 50s, when they were doing tours, because this mine has been doing tours since the 1800s. And they employed kids at one point for lanterns, in certain spots. They'll just hold lanterns and light the way for people. And sometimes these kids would get bored, and they just set their lanterns down to light the way, and they'd go off and play hide and seek or something. Well, they used to wear around their wrists like bells, like a jingle bell kind of thing, around their wrists, because in case if they got lost or whatnot, they could shake that and help people to find them. And what the hell is that? Oh, it's getting an Amber Alert here. Anyway, the kids disappeared and were never seen again. And the cave system is big, but it's not that big, and it's been explored. These two kids disappeared. And that story piqued my interest. While we were walking out of the cave, I kid you not, I heard one of those bells go off as we were walking out of that section. I heard it. And I stopped and I looked, and, everyone's holding these lanterns made out of these pails. They do make a noise when you move the handle. That wasn't the noise. This was a bell, like a jingle bell. I heard it. It was just once. It was brief. I stopped to hear it, see if I could hear it again. I didn't. And in one spot of the cave, I woke in the back of it. There was a segment where I guess the owner and his wife used to have a little private place back there. And by private, I say that with air quotes. And when I walked back, we were back in that area, and I was the first one to get into it. And while I was there for a split second, I smelled sulfur. It's not that kind of a cave system. There's no sulfur. It's all limestone. There are some cave-like smells. It's a little damp, but I briefly smelled sulfur. Which, again, got my interest up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Later,
it makes you wonder if this is kind of like the stone tape theory, i.e. kind of things that are recorded in the stone or kind of like in the surroundings that are activated. It makes you wonder, what is the thing that activates it? So obviously it's you, Mark, but kind of like, is it your thinking? Were you thinking about it? Were you kind of like, is it your energy? I wonder what actually kind of triggers the bell to ring or you hearing the bell.
Well, I think it's a couple of things. Let me finish what happened. As I mentioned, I was recording with my audio recorder the entire tour. When I came back home, I listened to the recording, and twice I caught voices that were not me, and it wasn't anybody else in the group. And, you have to be careful in these situations because there is a group of people there. It is a cave. Voices can carry and whatnot. But yet I remember everything that happened because it was fresh in my mind, came back, played the tape, and I know these two instances were not anybody near me, because the first one I caught, I was way in the back of the line and I was trailing, and I was doing that on purpose. And this voice that came through was loud, like it was right next to me. I got a voice that just goes, wow. And it wasn't me, it wasn't my voice. And then later in the cave, when we were back in that section, back where the boys disappeared, where I heard the bell, another voice chimed in right next to my recorder, and the quality of it is different from anybody else in the cave. You can hear, everyone's quiet because you can hear the guide is talking in the background, explaining something about the cave, and this voice came in right next to me and said, "It's so cold." And that cave
is spooky. But look who's over there. It's Ron Murphy. Can you see him?
Oh.
As usual, he always late when
he's out the window. We'll wave him in.
Come on, Ron. Oh, no,
come on, I want to finish my story
Mark,
here.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yes, sir.
Did you happen to catch the bells on the recorder?
No, the recorder had shut off by that point, and unfortunately, so I did not catch the bells. But on the positive side, I did speak with the owners of the mine, and I've scored an investigation. I mean, not the mine, the cave system. So we're going to get into the cave after they've closed, and I'll have the entire thing to myself. So we're going to be doing an investigation here in a couple of weeks. But and Andrew, to answer your question, I did not feel this was residual. I feel that between the EVPs and whatever was happening there, there's some intelligent stuff going on, and I think there's some other types of phenomena going on. One of the things I'm really interested in researching is the whole concept, like miners talk about, the Tommy knockers, or and I've name dropped Barry Fitzgerald in some of these places, these mines and caves he's gone into and heard these voices and that other thing. There's other types of phenomena. There's stories about supposed beings and entities living in the earth in these cave systems. And I think some of that might be related. So those are the types of things that I'm going to be investigating when we go back in and do the full investigation.
Well, the interesting thing is that the smell of sulfur is kind of synonymous with demonic activity and kind of astral activity.
Say hello to Ron.
Say-
Ron's here.
Yeah, Ron, it's
Hello,
about
Ron.
time.
Hi, Ron.
It's time.
He's standing
Greetings
there.
and
I must
salutations.
take notice of him.
Well, we was trying
Just-
to finish my story first, so
just standing here waiting to get a drink, guys. Come on. I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm like a big-time radio host now, and I have other radio shows to do, but I thought I'd come by and get a quick drink with you guys, so...
Yeah, and they all go out on the Paranormal UK Radio Network.
They do. I'm very happy to be a part of it. But I was listening to Mark's story, and that sounds like I'm looking forward to this, Mark. I can't wait for the follow-up.
Oh, yeah. Well, Sari is going to be investigating these caves of the winds.
That's going to be great.
Cave of the Winds, and I was at a ghost town yesterday outside of Victor, Colorado. I'm going to be posting some video and some pictures later of that. But these old ghost towns, when the summer gets here and the snow all melts, I want to get in and investigate a few of these ghost towns at night too. So there's some cool areas around here.
And Mark, are you going to be doing this solo, or are you going to bring somebody with you?
No, I have some people that I'm lining up to help me go and investigate. The cave system, I want to keep it small for obvious reasons, but trying to get some equipment together on that one. So I won't be going in by myself.
I'll be
Only
there.
because that sulfur thing, again, leading maybe to, something demonic. It's always good to have a little backup when you go in. That's just a concern. That's all.
Well, one of the things Irene and I are going to be doing is probably before we even get in there, we're going to be doing some remote views into the cave, see what we can pick up on. Give us a heads up before we get in there.
Now I want to ask Andy, did you have any experiences over Christmas? Andy?
Mercer.
Has he gone to the loo?
I think so.
Andy?
He's on the astral plane right now.
Maybe he's dropped out. Has anyone else got anything? Oh, he's here.
Is he?
Go for it, Andy.
You need to speak up, Andy. That's how we hear you.
He's over at the bar. He can't talk up.
I think he's being like, he's chatting to Eric. Is that Eric over there?
It could be Eric.
Oh, God. Eric Abora's here.
Oh, God. I'll try and keep him at bay. If we kind of like hide our heads and just kind of like turn our backs, he might not
You've got to
notice.
keep your heads down. Eric Abora's in the bar. Oh.
I mean, it's going back to something that was mentioned earlier. I too also think that there's a pressure building or a ramping up of a lot of this activity, and I think it's actually aiding all these events taking place globally. You can just feel it. It's almost it's like when you walk into a negative, like a room where someone's been fighting, you kind of feel it. So I can't prove it yet, but I think with all the energy being ignited with all these volcanoes and some of these super ones getting active now, I think we're going to see some stuff that's going to blow the minds of a lot of people.
Ryan, do you think CERN has anything to do with this at all?
The first place that everybody wants to blame is CERN. I don't think it helps, but I don't think it has anything to do with it. I think it's a tremendous amount of energy that's building globally on all fronts, between wars and this arguments and this falsehood going back and forth between superpowers blaming each other. It's just everything. It's a ramping up, and I don't think it has to do with CERN. They like to blame CERN. They blame them for everything at this point, but nope, I don't think it's that. It's outward effects of the other planets that they've recently discovered to have a totally perpendicular orbit to what we would already know growing up. So there's a lot going on. It's just trying to put your finger on the pulse, and you can just feel it. Some people are angry, although this year's starting off a lot lighter. It is lighter, but you can still feel there's something building.
Plays into it, isn't it?
It's certainly lighter with celebrities.
Andy, you're back.
Yeah.
Sure.
Andy, you're back. Are you back?
Nope, he just walked right past me.
Did he? Oh,
Yep.
my gosh.
I think, is he drunk?
I think he's... No. He's just talking to people in the pub, I think. Here comes Andy back from the bar.
Oh,
Did you bring us all crisps?
Andy, what happened to you over Christmas? Anything spooky?
Nothing ghostly in particular, but I can talk a little bit about what Mark was talking about previously with his underground experiences. I've investigated more times than I care to remember a location called Woodchester Mansion over in Gloucestershire. Now, it's kind of got a link to cave-like because the building itself backs onto the side of a hill and actually cut slightly into the hill to build part of the previous building that was on the site. Now, I'll give you a quick history of Woodchester Mansion. It was a building built in the mid-Victorian period, but was never finished. The guy who was having it built ran out of money, effectively. He was a trader and merchant and had land over in the Caribbean, and unfortunately a heavy storm destroyed much of the sugar plantation that he owned. So money was lost. But the building itself, never finished, was left as a wreck, and from the turn of the last century up until the 1980s, it was pretty much abandoned, and there were various nefarious activities taking place inside Woodchester, everything from dogging type stuff that Andrew was talking about earlier to actual satanic rituals. So it's had quite a nasty history to it. Now, I was on only the second ever investigation at the Woodchester Mansion back in 2001, and the previous one before that was with the Ghost Club, and one of the things they'd experienced there was a very strange phenomena. During their investigation, they heard what sounded like drilling noises, and then as if the roof was collapsing, a very loud, heavy sound of masonry falling. Of course, they panicked, went outside to make sure everything was okay, and the building was completely fine. But they've got that on recording. And one of the investigations I was involved in was a public investigation, public event with a company called Fright Nights back in the day. And we were in the bathroom on the first floor. The bathroom itself is never completed. It's just like a stone room with a stone bath in it. There was about half a dozen of us there, and all of a sudden we could hear masonry falling, very loud, very heavy, as if part of the roof was collapsing. Now, I knew about what the Ghost Club had experienced before, but obviously the other people that didn't know about it, and they were rather panicked, thinking, the building's falling down. So we came out of the bathroom, still on the first floor, looking around with torches, etc. There was no sign of anything moved. We radioed to another group in a different part of the building, and they heard absolutely nothing. But yet they were only on the floor below, across the other side. But yet the sound was so clear, so definite, of literally masonry falling, large parts of the roof coming off. But nothing had fallen, so we were rather quite taken aback by that experience. That was pretty amazing.
That's one of those cases where it's like what Andy was saying about the possible something like something from the past, maybe some construction in the past, and one of those those whatever reason those noises from a past event are replaying out as a I can't even think of the name.
Like a replay. I mean, essentially, yes, because there was a building on the site before called Spring House, and that was demolished by the guy who was having Woodchester Mansion built. Oddly enough, there was nothing wrong with Spring House. It's completely normal, completely intact Georgian building, which he had demolished to build his own building. So there's been suggestions and rumours that he wanted the building to be designed a certain way to harness certain powers. Indeed, there was one of the large underground what's it called? The basement, basically. There's a room at the back that's hexagonal and has a large column in the centre, which is quite ornate. And it's been suggested before that perhaps rituals took place there. I mean, we don't know. There's no evidence at all. But the suggestion has been made that there was very specific reasons why he had this building demolished to be replaced by his own construction or his own design. So it's a very fascinating location, and many, many strange things have happened there. But you were just talking about underground, and this is that same kind of thing, if you like. There was an activity, but one of the strongest elements you get from Woodchester is as a figure in this rear corridor, which is the bit that goes actually into the hillside. A tall figure, dark figure, has been seen there so many times. It's quite amazing, and people give them very similar descriptions of this tall, dark figure that has a very negative feel about it. It's quite unpleasant. So, I've seen him quite a few times, and other people have done as well.
That's really interesting, because I know Woodchester Mansion, but I've never heard I've never heard anyone talk about this
Well, as far as I know, no one else has actually heard it. I mean, Fright Nights used to use it pretty much on a weekly basis. It was very popular. I did most of the investigations there. And that's the only time I've ever heard it. I've heard the recording of it because I knew Robert Snow quite well. He used to run the Ghost Club. And he's played me the recording, and there's like a heavy vibration, almost like a heavy drill sound. But it wouldn't have been a mechanical drill back in those days to have been used to demolish the previous buildings. You're talking about the early 1800s. But then that masonry falling sound was what they described as well, and it was quite amazing. To say there was about 7 or 8 of us who heard it, so it was in the atmosphere, if you like. It was a sound that we were all hearing, not simply in our heads.
Yeah, amazing. What about you, Ronald? Did anything spooky happen to you?
Absolutely nothing. Just putting up with Christmas with 5 kids. That was terrifying enough. I had a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of unexplained things being thrown across the room. That kind of thing happened to me. But nothing spooky or anything. No, I did a show with Andy, which was on Jack the Ripper, which I'm looking forward to having it out. And then Colin and I did a few shows, and I'm looking to do another one here with him in about 45 minutes. So we got a lot of stuff going on, but nothing incredibly spooky, unfortunately.
Okay, so you're doing another one with Colin?
I am.
I am. Me and Mark are trying to get through all the others that you've done.
I'll tell you what, we're just stockpiling them in case there, some sort of apocalypse comes, because as I came into the bar, I heard you talking about all this kind of stuff. So, it's possible that we would no longer be alive, but these shows would still be beaming out there. So that's one good thing to look at.
Yes, that's our philosophy as well. So, Ronald, we're in the same company.
That's
Stockpile them.
That's right. Stockpile them if you need them.
A lot of editing to do there, Mark.
Yes, I know. Well, that's what we get for running a network. Oh, that's right. You wanted that. Oh! And yet I do all the work.
If anything goes wrong at any point, Irene is going to throw that straight back at you. It's your fault. You wanted this. Yes. Don't blame you, Mark.
Not that I'm one to point fingers. Well, I think we got on an interesting track here earlier, and I'd like to get your guys' thoughts on this. The idea of we got two concepts going here. There's one about possible creatures or entities in the underground, in mines and caves, but then I also like the idea of this residual haunting. So maybe we could focus on those as we go forward here, because as we mentioned what I thought I smelled in the cave, and also what Andy, what you were talking about in the cellars, and hearing that masonry falling, trying to figure out, it's such an interesting concept. And I know in the paranormal world, everybody tends to blame it on natural factors like, oh, well, if you got limestone or granite or running water or something, and those intense events, imprint themselves and then play them back over and over. It's like, how is masonry falling, an intense emotional event? Or even some of these things where you hear, maybe somebody cough or sneeze or hear footsteps. How is that an intense emotion that imprints itself on a location? So I think you're...
But you're talking about that. Look at my house, right? Now, I've got 2 kitchens. I've got the main kitchen I use, and then there's the original old kitchen. And sometimes the early hours of the morning, you can hear pots and pans and things clunking away in there as if someone's washing up and putting them away. There is no pots and pans or anything in there.
Right. So it's a past event, and this is where... But
the point is, this was a happy house. It wasn't nothing traumatic.
I'd also agree entirely with what Mark's saying there. One of the things I noticed a lot of investigations I've been on, when they've been to locations that have a, quote, history of being haunted, and you can read books about them, those events never occur on investigations. Something different occurs, and they're usually much more mundane, like seeing sort of figures moving past and not objects being moved, but nothing along the lines of what's often described in books. I mean, Woodchester Mansion itself, going back to that good old place, has got several quite well-known stories of hauntings there, and very few of those ever happened when I was there. But it just reminded me of something else, Mark, about that Woodchester. They're in the cellar. A number of times people have described seeing a small golem-like figure, if you like, actually climbing out of the ground itself. And as I say, different people who at the time would have known each other or had easy connection to each other have described a similar thing of a small figure that some have described being like Gollum from Lord of the Rings, or just a small dwarf-like creature being seen in the cellar are literally climbing out of the ground in the cellar. So again, that kind of links back to what you're talking about.
Yeah, the same thing is reported in western Pennsylvania as well. Of course, immigrants brought in the idea of the Tommyknocker. You know, that's a European folklore. But there have been these creatures reported. There's a mine disaster that happened at the turn of the century, not very far from where I'm at. It's called Dixonville in Indiana County. And as the story goes, and I'm sure it's been, kind of updated along the years, but how the initial story came about is that there was a cave-in, and as the rescue workers were getting to the trapped miners, something came up out of the ground, and there was people reporting seeing these strange little creatures, kind of like you described, Andy, and some of the miners actually had scratch marks because it seemed that there was a predatory creature coming upon these miners. And not only that, but it seemed that these creatures themselves may have caused the cave-in rather than something natural occurring. And that's one of those very curious things. Now, I just finished a book on the archetype of the vampire, and it's under editorial processes right now. But in Greece, there was an idea of these vampiric creatures arising out of the cave systems, and that's how they were described: very foul-smelling animals, sort of akin to what would be like a baboon. I think is how kind of like a dog-like face. But they were more humanoid than animalistic, But they were described to come up and feed off of people and prey on them in certain times of the year. So these kind of stories stretch not only from in time and place, but also in various cultures. So that's one of the things that I like to look at as an investigator. Why do places like, in Europe and in America and in England, why do they have these similar type of things going on? How do you explain this?
I mean, you've got the similar kind of thing also in Romania and Bulgaria. They talk about things called the kobolds, which come out of the ground, dark blue in skin colour. Also going up to Scandinavia, you've got similar kind of things with, again, the small trolls. I mean, we think of trolls as being these big monstrous things, but there's much smaller versions that are described in Nordic mythology as well. I mean, there's a whole gambit of stuff to do with the underworld with Nordic mythology, of things coming from the ground and having both beneficial and malignant effects on people.
Well, there's also, the Icelandic elves. And it's such a powerful thing there that they actually divert roads to go around these locations where these elves supposedly are. You've got Icelandic elves, Celtic fairy lore, Middle Eastern jinn. They all seem to connect to these underground dwelling entities or creatures. Are they spiritual? Are they physical? Do they have, maybe they're physical, but they have like interdimensional properties? I mean, these are things that I'm really fascinated with and want to investigate more. Now, you mentioned seeing that they talk about the golem-like creature coming out of the ground. There's a fascinating YouTube video where sewer workers, and I forget the city where it happened in, they had a robot going down and scoping inside the sewers, and as the camera is moving up, this creature through a side tunnel just goes flying past the camera. And then a few minutes later, as the robot turns the corner, it stops for a minute. Then you see this creature poke its head out from behind. You see the eyes shine, and then it steps out almost fully into the frame, and it looks like a golem-type creature. And then the robot starts to move, and that thing just, boom, splits and is gone. And it makes me think that this could be possibly one of these types of entities or creatures or whatever the hell they are that people are experiencing in these caves, mines, basements. I mean, a lot of the lore is that, especially in the Celtic lore, where they have the fairy mounds or the fairy raths or the locations where these things live, and humans stupidly come in and build buildings on top of these locations. And that could be a cause for a lot of the activity that people are dealing with. I dealt with this case in Jersey a few years ago where this whole neighborhood in Bloomingdale was having activity, especially these two houses across the street from each other. And now in hindsight, at the time, we knew what was there wasn't in any of the houses. It was attached to the land. Sometimes it seemed to be malevolent. Other times it was just there. And now that a couple of years have passed and I've learned more about it, I'm honestly beginning to think that it might be related to this type of phenomenon. something that's related to the land that these houses are built on top of.
It's interesting because I was going to say, going back to Pennsylvania, something that we've been researching a lot, Al and I, believe it or not, is the Dogman, which is a cryptid as well. 12-foot tall werewolf. They seem to appear and then disappear, and a lot of it's coming out of the PA area. And one of the things I was investigating is there any connection to any type of cave system to these creatures to be able to move quickly and come in and out and disappear on a dime? And there's a tremendous amount of cave systems, not only just through water, but huge cave systems that are throughout the state of Pennsylvania. And they bleed into other areas up into upper New York State where there have been sightings, parts of New Jersey where there have been sightings, Maryland, and so on and so forth. So I definitely think there is something more to the cave systems and the inner earth type of creature or cryptid, be it golems, gnomes, wisps, fairies, and even larger creatures like the Dogman, possibly even the Bigfoot type of creature. That's why you can't find them.
Yeah, that's a good point, Brian. Back in 2016, which seems like, years ago, even though it was probably only 8 months ago, I actually had a book published called On Dogman, Tracking the Werewolf Through History, because my neck of the woods here in western Pennsylvania, we have a tremendous amount of Dogman sightings. And I like to focus on this one mountain system. It's a part of the Appalachian Plateau, but it's called the Chestnut Ridge, and it extends from right below the New York border down into Morgantown, West Virginia is where it terminates. And that place is filled with limestone and granitic rock, and it's the prime source for not only sightings of cryptids, but also ghostly sightings and UFOs. But it seems like particular areas are hotbeds for the paranormal, whatever might be going on there. But the idea of something being able to disappear and reappear in different places, and just to think, from a very simple naturalistic point of view, they might be utilizing underground cave systems. It makes perfect sense.
100%.
There's some ideas we have on that, and I know Andy Mercer has a story on that, but we do have to go to break, and we need another round of pints anyway here. So, Ron, since you came in late, you're buying. And so we're going to cut to a brief commercial break.
Can I just say, talking about the gnome type of thing, somebody anonymous sent me a little gnome through the post. Christmas. Yeah.
Aww. Well, when we come back, we'll...
He got that for Christmas.
Now, Andrew, did it show up alive, or was it dead whenever it came to you?
Well, it was ceramic, so maybe cast in stone by the evil snow witch or something.
That's right.
Okay.
It stayed out.
On that note, commercial break, chips, and another round, and we will be right back after these moves. Yeah, I'm American. Chips.
Crisps.
Bug off. Anyway, we'll be right back.
I'm Sonia Brose, Catholic charismatic and spiritual warrior who has spent years fighting negative forces. My new book, The Curse of El Diablo, has just been published by Glennet Ty. The Curse of El Diablo is the true story of my journey to northern Mexico to help a family tormented by an evil sorcerer skilled in the arts of brujeria. But I soon found myself in a dangerous struggle as I battled the evil forces thrown at me by this brujo, and it was only my faith in God that protected me from the onslaught. The Curse of El Diablo is an epic story of a struggle between the forces of good and evil and the triumph of faith over darkness. The Curse of El Diablo is now available in softcover and ebook format on Amazon.com and on GlanetTie.com.
Have you ever wanted to visit the south of Italy? Amalfi, Ravello, Positano, Sorrento, places of immense beauty on the Amalfitana coast. Nearby Vesuvius stands proud against the sky, shadowing the ancient Roman ruins of Pompeii. In the midst of all this beauty lies the picturesque hillside village of Pontoni that dates back to the Middle Ages. Stay in Pontoni, in the self-catering apartments of Il Petrale, the beautiful casa belonging to Carmiana Respoli, who will warmly welcome you when you arrive. Il Petrale, a haven of peace in the heart of this magnificent place called Pontoni. For more information, email us at carminerispoli@email.it. That's Carmine Rispoli, CarmineRispoli @email.it.
Good evening, Agent 47. It has come to our attention, through the highest intelligence sources, that Irene Allen Block has published her novel, The Psychic Spy. Our sources tell us that The Psychic Spy is a riveting thriller about Eileen Evans, a beautiful young psychic who is recruited by British intelligence during the Cold War to participate in their top-secret remote viewing spy program. Eileen soon finds herself plunged deeper into the darkest heart of the intelligence community as she is ultimately trained as a spy and a psychic assassin. Nick Redfern says The Psychic Spy is filled with adventure, intrigue, and shadowy characters, and as Irene Allen Block shows, the mind is a mysterious and dangerous tool. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to immediately purchase a copy of The Psychic Spy by Irene Allen Block, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Glenatai.com. This tape will self-destruct in 1 second.
Imagine no longer being tied down to your computer, but having the freedom to take live talk radio with you anywhere you go. TalkStream Live introduces our first ever iPhone application. The talk shows you follow now follow you, and your iPhone is now the fastest and easiest way to stay connected to the best talk radio on the internet. Listen to live talk shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. TalkStream Live, now available in the iTunes App Store.
Welcome back to Paranormal UK Radio. We're sitting here in the old Cock and Bawls pub. We have a few of our show hosts with us from the network. Andy Mercer, Al Santariga, Andrew Chaplin, Brian Bowden and Ronald Murphy. And now it's just me and Mark.
That was it.
Okay, what were we talking about?
Well, let's just kind of bring up roughly what we were just talking about during the break. There was a possibility that the kind of sulfur-type smells and kind of like the connotations of like hell and demonic, maybe that was the instigating thought of the idea of the Christian hell type thing. And there was we were talking about the kind of the connections with the pagan religions and how that would have merged with the Christianity religion.
Well, I used to go skiing in California on Mammoth Mountain. Mammoth Mountain is a active volcano, and one day it's going to blow. And one of the last times I was skiing there, about like 25 years ago, they had a part of the mountain cordoned off, and there was steam vents coming out with this sulfur smell coming out of the earth. I think that's where we get the whole sulfur and brimstone, because people have been around, like in Italy and in Europe and places in the Mediterranean, the volcanic regions. You'll still have these vents coming out of the ground where the sulfur smell is coming out. I think that's how that got incorporated into beliefs like Christianity, hell being underground, sulfur, fire and brimstone, yada yada.
Yes, totally agree.
Yeah, and also the whole idea of hell too. If we look at Jesus's words of the New Testament, he talks about Gehenna, which was a valley system there outside of Jerusalem where garbage was burned and things. So if you would go to Gehenna, that would be kind of like a no man's land, especially for devout Jews that wanted to stay purified and clean. So that would be a place of fire and desolation and refuge. So I think it comes into a lot of different places. ideas. But I'm not talking about that these ideas of these events being the hell itself. I'm talking about the denizens of hell, the way that they might have seen demons at the time. And I think that there is something to be said about these creatures being seen as demons, especially if we look at the works of like Hieronymus Bosch or Bruegel, and we see these ideas of these demons which look very humanistic, but they have these animal semblances as well. So whenever I look at these kind of things throughout history, it seems to me that there's something coming into play here. Whether it just fed the mythology at first, it was kind of an artistic rendition and a genre after that, or it's kind of nebulous about how it all happened. But it seems to me that there is instances throughout history that actual demons were seen to emerge from the underground, and this might actually relate back to the cryptids that we're talking about now.
Well, and of course, the question also is it that the fact that humans have picked up that these beings existed, or has the belief in those beings actually created them like culpas and turned them into reality? That's the next thing.
Well, I mean, Andy, I think you had another story or point about some of these cave-dwelling beings, didn't you?
Yeah, I suddenly thought I'd sat down at the wrong table for a second there. Where did the demons come from? Oh, God, no demons. Yes, there's a location not too far from me here in Essex. It's called the Kelvin and Hatch Secret Nuclear Bunker, which is, of course, not very secret now. But regularly had... You've been there. It's not far from you either, is it? Well, it's basically it was built in the 1950s, built downwards and 4 floors into the earth. Now, not surprisingly, there are recorded of ghostly activity that involve people from the military have been seen down there, people in uniform, etc., etc. Mediums have picked up on things like women who'd worked on the radio desks there. 'Cause it was always constantly manned. It was not a large team, but there was always people there. But more and more, people have also picked up on something that they can't make sense of, because it doesn't fit at all with the storyline of a place built in the 1950s, closed in the 1980s, reopened as a tourist attraction in the 2000s. People are picking up on what feels like a very, very old presence. Some kind of, again, more of an energy rather than a being. There's nothing's ever really been seen as such, but just a feeling of something being in that place, in the lower parts of it especially, that doesn't feel right, doesn't feel like it belongs there. It's also been said to feel very, very old, and it's been suggested by, should we say, more Christian elements, spiritualist elements. It's a demon, but I'm not up with that sort of thing at all. But it's something there, something old, something that doesn't feel it has a direct relationship to the building, but yet the fact the building's there has disturbed the earth down 4 floors and has caused whatever this thing is to become kind of in the background, but people sense it being there. And as I say, it doesn't fit at all with the narrative of a secret nuclear bunker, but it's definitely something there that people pick up on, which I find is absolutely fascinating.
I have a couple of friends that were they actually worked in the U.S. Military, that they were in the bunkers and where the missiles were. They were in charge of launching them, and they've come here and there when we start talking about spooky stuff. They reference stories of them down 30, 50, whatever feet they are underground, and they hear scratching on the walls.
Mm-hmm.
And they never report it because, when you're in the military, you report something like that, they're going to Section 8 you and your career's over. But I just find it intriguing because I see it on a different perspective, and scratching on the walls, the first thing I'm thinking of is, some kind of underground dweller or creature or cryptid.
Now, this nuclear bunker that Andy's talking about, and in fact I know it well because I live close to it, and they actually do zombie games there. So basically they have actors dressed as zombies, and kind of you go with airsoft guns, which is another thing I'm into. It's like paintball. And this particular company, The Last Survivors, run very realistic kind of zombie games, and you're in groups of about, I'd say, 10 or 20 people. They dim all the lights down. Now, interestingly, they usually have about 6 zombies, and what the zombies do is they run around because it's quite a big bunker, and they kind of like hide in different places and jump out at you. Now, in the kind of the bunk bed area, Andy, you probably know where the bunk bed area is. Where the doctor's surgery is as well. There was a team of about 2 other people with me, and we were quite away from the main crowd, so the rest of the kind of like the newbies were kind of like distracting the other zombies in other areas. So the more noise you make, the more the zombies are attracted to you. So they were making a lot of noise and screaming. A lot of the zombies were kind of like going after them. So we had our mission in the top part to collect like radio parts, I think it was. Now we were opening very carefully and very slowly the metal doors and some of the other doors, and I swear that we were in the kind of the upper area where the bunk beds were, and we heard a door slam behind us that we'd already shut. Now we weren't thinking spooks and ghosts. We were thinking, oh, it's one of the zombies. They found us. Let's go and get them. So we kind of like rushed to the door, opened the door, expecting a zombie and expecting to be able to blast them away. And there was nothing there. And that happened on a couple of occasions. And this kind of feeling of like a presence there is definitely palpable. Even my friends who are not really into the whole ghost and spook thing were a bit unnerved by that. And there's also some audio recording that we think might be like an unexplained voice as well, because one of my friends had like a head cam, so he was recording it using infrared as we were going around, and there was some kind of inaudible female voice, and we had no females in our little team, and we were being quite quiet, or as quiet as we could be as we were going around. So it's my belief there is something there. There is definitely something there.
Might be slightly more better for you. At the moment, I can't really show it to anybody because it was an investigation my group I've recently become involved with. But we think we've captured something on camera in the same area you're talking about, in the surgical area, which is not human. I mean, what on earth it is? It was a matter of debate between all of us. I think everyone in the groups now agreed there was something there.
Can you describe it? What would it look like?
It really can't. It kind of had a face, but you only see half of it, and it's almost like a puppet. It's really weird trying to explain what it looks like. I know, it just really is strange. One person suggested the thing out of Jigsaw, you know, that thing, that kind of face, not the actual Jigsaw from the films, but that kind of almost wooden face is very, very strange. If I can get the permission of the group who own the footage, what I can do is, as you guys probably now know, I do the YouTube channel for us. I put all the shows on YouTube, and what I can do with this show is put a link to the video clip if it's okay with the guys who own the video clip. Obviously, I need to get the clearance first of all. But it is something really quite odd that appears to be behind. There's like medical curtains, you sort of think you see in a hospital, and there's a gap between two of them. And as the camera pans towards the gap, this thing comes into frame in the gap, stays still, and as the camera moves, but before it moves, it literally jumps back away from the camera. So the person filming didn't realize they'd caught it, but certainly you do see it moving past, as if it's moving whilst in frame rather than just where the camera's moved. You see what I mean? You can see that it's actually moving, and then the camera moves away from it.
Wow.
You're going to try and put that on the Paranormal UK Radio Network YouTube channel, yes?
I will put a link to it if it's okay with the person.
To this episode.
Can I just do a nasty plug, a naughty plug?
Go for it.
Okay. Right. Many, many years ago, I was asked to investigate in Dover the detached Bastille Napoleonic fort.
Napoleon.
I haven't even had too many to drink, have I? Anyway, down there, I detected something very, very similar to what you're talking about, something very old and dark. And anybody that wants to read about it, they can read about it in my book, Among the Spirits, published by Planet Time.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
One more very...
Can I do another plug? Can I do a plug for the Last Survivors, because I know the owner there, and he's cut me some slack. So if anyone's interested in doing the zombie gaming on Facebook, it's The Last Survivors, and you'll find it easily, and that's all the details there. It's a very fun experience. It's quite an amazing, quite disturbing experience in many ways, but I won't give the details of why.
Do you also know Coal House Fort, Andrew?
I've heard of it, but I've not been there. Whereabouts is that?
That's pretty much probably the closest location. It's in Grays in South Essex.
Oh, okay.
I mentioned it.
Back in the 50s and 60s, did the schoolboys go there camping?
Well, I was there.
So I'm sure my brother went there.
A short side story. It was my very first ever paranormal experience was there when I was about 11 years old. I'll tell that story in a sec, but this is the thing I wanted to mention. It's another place that is dug slightly into the landscape. It's the fort that's there now was built during the Napoleonic times. That's the word you want, Napoleonic. And originally, it was added to during the First World War and added to again in the Second World War, but the original fort is Napoleonic. Now, again, people do pick up and see and sense sort of World War I, World War II type characters wandering around. In fact, I had an amazing full body apparition appear right beside me, actually down there on an investigation. But again, if you're there for a number of hours, people do start to get this sense that there's something else there that's much, much older, that doesn't feel right, that feels, I wouldn't say evil, I mean, I don't like that terminology anyway, but it feels darker. It feels as if whatever it is quite angry, and it's been suggested that perhaps it's been affected by the fact the land's been dug into. But say this goes back to the 1700s, this particular site, and it has got this strange anomaly that seems to wander around in the lower.
We've spoken about tonight, then 3 similar stories.
Absolutely, there's definitely something about this idea of, I mean, as you know, I'm into the occult stuff as well, about the genii loci, the spirit of a place, that it can be affected when things happen at its location, that any old location has got these energies, entities that almost protect it, and if things are done to the locations or happening there, then all sorts of strange things start to happen, particularly with Cold House Fort. Like Woodchester Mansion, back in the early 90s and late 80s, there was undoubtedly ritual activity happening there. I mean, I saw some of it myself. There was a lot of things occurring in Essex in the 80s linked around a guy called the Black Alchemist, which is another story entirely. My friend Eddie Collins is the guy for that. But we come across other examples of this sort of thing going on, where things were happening, that things were being caused quite deliberately, and Cold House Fort site was one of those places that was being accessed, because certainly back in the 80s you could get into it quite easily. There was no one there. It was officially closed down, was seen as a death trap, very dangerous, but there were so many holes in the fence you could easily get into it. In fact, on my first show with Ron, we talked about our first experiences of ghosts. So if guys want to listen to my ghost story about what happened to me at Cold House Fort when I was 11, go listen to that show. So save telling you all the same story again. But essentially there has been odd activity that's taken place in Cold House Fort in the 80s. We've seen the evidence of it, and as I said, there was definitely odd stuff happening in Woodchester Mansion in the 80s, and we've heard stories about it. Not seen evidence myself, but I've seen stuff at Cold House Fort rather, that was left behind by these ritual activities that were taking place. So there is a definite link between earth disturbances of some kind or other and changes to the earth environment, and then odd things happening that link not to the place necessarily that's on the site, but to earlier periods in time, much older entities emerging.
You know, I mentioned earlier about the Icelandic elves and how the government there not only respects them, but they'll divert roadways around them. You know, other stories are because Iceland has become a famous spot for Hollywood to go and make a lot of movies when they're looking for, unique landscapes for films and even television shows, and they shoot there because of that whole volcanic geography of the island. And one of the things that they do on film shoots when they go there, they have to perform rituals before they do film shoots to quote unquote appease the elves so that they have a trouble-free shoot, because they've had problems in the past where if they don't, then they start having equipment malfunctions, camera malfunctions, weird weather. All these things seem to happen, and then when afterwards that they come in and start doing these rituals, asking permission and appeasing the elves, leaving little offerings, then they have a trouble-free shoot. So, people, science would look at that and be skeptical and say it's all superstition, but you know what? It still happens. And it's still related very much, again, all over Europe and even here in America with these same types of mischievous entities, and sometimes, having to appease them. Sometimes they're just mischievous. Sometimes they can be nasty.
Well, it's
kind of like an elven mafia that you have to pay off.
Well, there's been a couple of very good books came out recently, which are both translations of Icelandic grimoire magic, both called Icelandic Magic. One's by a guy called Christopher Smith, who I know, and Edward Thorson, Stephen Flowers, have both written books that have recently come out talking about particularly Icelandic magic, not runes, but actual proper Icelandic magic that, again, are talking about appeasement very often and trying to get the aid of these particular little spiritual entities. So it's a strong tradition in Iceland, especially. It's the last country in Europe that became officially Christian, and that was less than 1,000 years ago. So it's certainly its back history is still very strong with its old ways and old traditions, because it's obviously quite an isolated landmass outside of mainland Europe. But yeah, those traditions are still very strong in those parts of the world, certainly.
Well, a lot of those traditions also came over with, when the Vikings came in and settled throughout the area. So you got a lot of that northern Norse mythology interrelated with some of this activity going on there as well.
Absolutely. Excuse me. I mean, I'm working on my next book at the moment. It's a lot mainly about folklore magic of the UK, but it doesn't fit in with the remit of my book, so it's not mentioned too much. But there are certainly folk tales of underground dwellers. Lewis Spence wrote a book, not the singer Lewis Spence, an old writer Lewis Spence, wrote about the sort of folklore tradition around mining in the UK that talks again a lot about entities and beings that are seen down in the mines, sometimes helping the miners by sort of warning them of dangers, and sometimes hindering the miners. So again, it's a strong tradition you've got over in the UK as well.
I remember when I'm going to Norway on a school trip, and one of the myths out there is you've got to say hello to the trolls as you cross a bridge. You've literally, and people do that. Apparently, if they're driving along and they come to a bridge, they just say a quick hello.
Absolutely. So it's one of my big beats with good old Disney is how they have robbed and taken European folklore stories from the Brothers Grimm especially, and really sanitized them and turned them into nice fairy stories for kids. But they're not fairy stories. I mean, you have the Grimm's fairy tales, but they also wrote the Grimm's Teutonic mythology, which is a much larger, broader collection of stories and tales that are, some of them are quite nasty, basically, about a lot of the history and the mythology of mainland and Northern Europe, especially around sort of Germany, obviously, because they were German. But those things like the trolls, we always see them all as comically now as being sort of rather silly, sort of a Disney kind of creation. But most of the Disney films, as we know, are based on Grimm's fairy tales and the Teutonic mythology, which, when you go back to the original stories, are far darker, far nastier.
Yes. I remember in school reading there was this short story, Billy Goat's Gruff, about a troll living under a bridge. And I always remember he would always say, pay the toll to the troll. And, so when you're driving across and having say hello to the trolls, I think that's paying your toll.
Does anybody know why they're always under bridges, trolls?
I think it's again, something about it's related to underground, being underneath, not a part of the above world where we live. And, this is our biosphere up here. This is what we live in. But it's like, I think these creatures who live underground, you can almost liken it to fish in the ocean, or at the very least amphibians who live in the water but come up and breathe the air and can come on land occasionally. I think a lot of these creatures, the more we learn, it seems like they live primarily underground but can pop up into our realm once in a while. Whether this is just purely a physical, they're underground, come up above ground, or whether we're dealing something that's a little more interdimensional, or it's an aspect of reality that we haven't figured out yet, or quite frankly, we forgot. It's always a part of our reality. We've tuned out.
I think if you look at it the other way also, if you're living underground, there's not that much light there. And I think hiding under a bridge or in a cave or under a rock, it shades your eyes from direct sunlight.
I was just going to ask that, because anything that lives underground usually is...
Yeah.
I think spiders are white, aren't they?
Hiding in closets. I've heard reports of these little, gnomes or whatever, hiding in closets or under the bed. It shades you from direct light, so you can still operate and work without blinding yourself or adjusting to the current surface light. I think that's a lot to play with it as well.
Which is why they come out at night, too. If they do appear, they're usually not during the day, and they come out at night. That's a possibility. And Brian, I wanted to ask you, because I know with you and Al and your group, and you've been doing a lot of research on that one area in New York State, and you seem to be experiencing possible Bigfoot activity in this area. And the reason I'm bringing Bigfoot into this is because there seems to be a lot of correlation in the more paranormal aspects of people who've had experiences with this creature that parallel a lot of the phenomena that people experience with these underground type of creatures. First and foremost, the ability to disappear, right, and not show yourself, and to be able to interact in a paranormal manner as well. What are your thoughts on that?
when we had our experience with whatever it was that was their nuclear lake in general, and then some of the interactions, this creature moved literally almost a mile and change in under a couple of seconds. So some people said something about it being interdimensional, and I'm still having a hard time with that. But the ability of it to travel through cave systems or underground, and definitely in the dark, it cloaks itself beautifully. I have a feeling like the Madagascar. I forgot the actual animal. I think they can see in the dark, and I think that's why anybody that's seen these creatures sees sometimes like a film over their eyes, or which protects their, gives them that night vision and protects them from bright lights. It's pretty interesting how they travel vast distances. It's the same creature, and they do travel in packs. It's not just like they're traveling by themselves. If you have one, you're going to have another. And what we're finding out on the other end, and again, still doing research on that dogman cryptid type of thing, which there is one type that has a Bigfoot more look to it. The cave systems is really huge. It seems that that's the main thoroughfare for this creature to go from point A to point B and disappear. That's why you don't find the bones, you don't find graves. You'll find the sticks and shelters, because when they pop up, that could be a marker saying that's the subway to get to that point. And we're not smart enough to look and go deeper into the cave systems. We're just looking, there's rocks there, but you don't realize you can get in and out of a rock. Something that size can move a boulder that looks like huge for you, push it to the side, go in and pull it back. Another thing with the paranormal aspect of it, there's a lot of reports about infrasound from these creatures, and them utilizing it to instill fear into their whoever they come across, be it intentionally or unintentionally. You could surprise these creatures. They're not well aware of everything around them. That's where most of these bad interactions take place. It's a surprise type of meeting. And we've heard reports of infrasound being used actually in New York State, in the area where Al is roughly living more so than I am. Tons of reports up there.
When you say infrasound, how is it manifesting then?
Vocally. Well, we have heard vocal interest, where it's using it has this uncanny ability, like a parrot, to mimic virtually anything, even human chatter, human voices. There's recordings of these creatures literally singing. I'm not going to say show tunes, but you can hear them singing, and just think of it on a logical sense. If you're in the woods by yourself with a group of the same type, and you don't normally come across people or humans, and when you see them, you observe them, you sit there, all you have is patience, and you mimic what they say, or you'll mimic a sound, and that's where I think they excel. They excel a lot of times when you think you're hearing coyotes. It's not coyotes, and this has been. I can't give you the researchers that have been using this and came across this. But they've definitely caught Bigfoot vocalizations where they're mimicking coyotes, they mimic birds, they mimic everything.
Well, that's interesting, because that's the first stages of learning to speak a language, is you mimic what you're hearing, even if it doesn't make sense to you. Your process of learning to speak is through copy and mimicking the sounds you're hearing. So, are they learning to speak? That's an interesting thought.
I'm going to assume that they actually do have a language amongst themselves.
Oh yeah, but
what it is, I don't
other
know.
Languages. Yeah, learn others. Maybe our languages or something language.
If you've there's the famous Sierra Sounds recordings back in the 70s. That really that they recorded a couple of these creatures, and it almost like a kind of a gibberish animal sound, but there is tone to it. It's definitely a language.
It's 100%. It sounds like gibberish. It's really actually unnerving. Some of them are like, if you heard it in the woods, you'd probably run. Most people would. But there's other reports, and I cringe when I hear this, of people having telepathic communications with these creatures. I'm not going to go that far to say that I believe it, but I've never experienced it. They definitely believe it. They definitely believe they've been told, come outside. They go outside. They do have an interaction with the creature. That's to be debated. I'd have to experience it myself to really say, yep, it's true. But I think there's multiple ways these creatures are communicating, and I think there's a pecking order in these creatures, from Bigfoot to Dogman to gnomes to trolls to golems, whatever you want to call it. And I think they do respect their own spaces, but in general, it's interesting. I mean, we're always on the look. I can't go any place now, and I'm sure Al can validate that too. I'm always thinking paranormal when I go. Visited my cousin in Delaware, and I'm like, wow, this is really squatchy. And right off the bat, you can just pick up on the little nuances. And then, of course, my wife yells at me, like, stop,
Yeah.
But, yeah, cut it out. We're going to go see family now, which I think some of them are Bigfoot. But in general, it's a pretty interesting, it's pretty interesting science and pseudoscience. Until you get one of these creatures alive and you can actually communicate with it, it's going to be a guessing game right now for us. But it's interesting. It's definitely interesting.
Well, in the whole concept of these underground creatures, and I wanted to bring, Irene, you've told this story on past shows, but it fits in perfect with what we're talking about now. You had a dream when you were young about some of these creatures.
Yeah, I did. I had a dream when I was about 7 years old, I think, roughly round about then, that stuck with me for the rest of my life. And I was brought up in the 50s, so we were not given horror stories of trolls and things like that. We lived off of really nice fairy stories and things like that. We used to get read to us in bed. But this particular dream this night, I was in an underground cave system, and I was witnessing only what I can describe as now. I didn't know what they were then, but I'd describe them now as troll-like creatures, tearing apart bodies and eating them. There was limbs and bits of bodies hanging in this cave system.
By bodies, you mean humans?
Humans, yeah, arms, legs.
Ooh.
And a 7-year-old girl brought up in the 50s was not, savvy on all that. Definitely not savvy on all that. My most horrible story I ever heard was Gulliver Travels.
Yeah, that would ruin my night.
Yeah.
Worryingly, there's a lot of people that go missing in the woods,
Yeah, but this stuck with me all my life.
Yeah.
And I told Mark about this a couple of years ago. And I can still see it now in my head. I can still see it.
Out of interest, did they look reptilian?
Oh, don't go down that
road. No, Mark and me put a photograph together similar to what I'd seen, didn't I? Didn't we, Mark?
Yeah, what she saw was very similar to the troll depictions in the Lord of the Rings movies and the Hobbit movies.
Very similar to that.
Yeah.
This was back in the 50s.
Yeah. Now, Andrew, you just mentioned...
But also, Mark, one other thing.
Go ahead.
You talk about these creatures, you're not sure about them communicating bloody Prosecco.
Telepathically.
Two things that I saw in my garden in separate years, especially the second one, communicated with me telepathically.
Have another drink, Irene. Well,
mentally.
Is that the beings that you saw that appeared to be cloaked?
That's right. Yeah. I could see this outline, a bit like Predator. This kind of shimmering outline of this thing's coming towards me, and it had very, very long arms, well down to its calves, sort of thing, like monkey arms. Very, very broad shoulders. I could make that out, and this thing did communicate with me. And I know it communicated with me, but I can't remember what the hell it said. The only thing I can think of is that it fed me something that maybe I'll use in later life. I don't know. And when the time's right, it'll come into my consciousness.
That is wild.
It is wild, yeah. And I've only seen them twice. The first one I saw was a smallish one, and I was always proud that I'd never seen anything alien. really proud. And I thought to myself, if I see anything alien, I'll jump through a bloody window. I'll be the first one out of here. So when I let my dogs out that night, the first one came towards me. It was only about 5 foot tall, and I could see it. And I just put my hand up in the don't go there fashion, and I said the magic words that begins with F and ends with off. And this thing didn't turn around and walk away. It walked backwards as if it was still looking at me, and then it just vanished. That was the first one. And then a couple of years later, I saw the second one, which was one big bug-off bugger. He was tall. He was about 6 foot, 7 foot tall. 6.5 foot, I should say. And that stood in front of me about 2-3 foot away from me. And I know I received something from that.
That's wild. There are other stories where, you guys mentioned reptilians, and on the alien side of it. And again, this is one thing where I really hesitate to call something like this alien, because people are jumped to those conclusions. Are these people have reported seeing a lot of these reptilian creatures underground, living in the earth? They're
could they be from the same sort of thing?
Yeah. Again, are you dealing with aliens or something more terrestrial based? Or what we think of, we're calling them aliens. Look at the Greys, okay? People think you think the Greys, and they're, aliens from Zeta Reticuli coming here to, give us anal probes. But there are other stories that people have had encounters with these beings underground as well. John Edmond, who owns the Stardust Ranch in Arizona, has told stories about dealing with these types of creatures all around his property. And while there are actual craft and UFO involved, a lot of these things seem to be from underground. And, there's even the famous story of when they first excavated in Dulce, New Mexico to have the base, they discovered a base already there underground filled with these gray aliens. And supposedly there was a shootout. There was a firefight between U.S. forces and these aliens.
It's a great cover, though, Mark. It's a great cover for any type of entity or creature to come into a system, be able to observe, come and go at will, because nobody's digging. Well, the government's digging. We know that with Dulce, but in general, no one's going underground. They're not digging to China. So it's a great cover. You can use the cave system. You can use the inner earth. Antarctica's recently popped up again about there's huge openings that are about craft size in the sides of mountains. I mean, that's where I would hide. Why be in space? There's too much junk up there. Go right there on the planet. You come out wherever you want. So it's perfect. And as far as, be it aliens being naturally here or creatures we don't know about that are indigenous to this planet, or even extraterrestrial. I had a recent extraterrestrial-ish type of thing with my daughter on New Year's Eve wasn't feeling well, my youngest, and she was overheated at a friend's house. She's sitting there and she's trying to relax. She has her shirt off. I'm rubbing her back to make sure she feels better. And I noticed a scoop mark on her right shoulder. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. So I got to check that out later on. But these things, it's a perfect way and vehicle for them to come and go as you please without being detected. What a great way to examine people having an underground base.
It's true. And, there's stories of UFOs and these things hiding in oceans, hiding in mountains. But there's also talk of, and this is something else to consider that's part of both the fairy lore and all the legends surrounding these creatures seen underground, is there talk of some of them being shapeshifters. Bigfoot has been accused of sometimes being a shapeshifting, like being Dogman. Some of these other cryptid creatures all have legends surrounding about being able to change shapes and
There's certainly
shift.
a question about the number of sightings of Bigfoot and Sasquatch and, of course, Yeti over in sort of mainland Europe, not going into the Himalayas. There are so many sightings of this creature, but yet no one's ever managed to capture one. Again, the suggestion maybe that they're not just flesh and bone, that there's something more going on there, that perhaps these things are manifestations of something else. So, yeah, I mean, that's a real possibility.
When you look at and we'll go back to the whole mine and cave examples, people who are in mines, and Andrew, you had mentioned before about people who go missing all over the world. In the U.S., It's a big thing that happens in the national park system. You know, hundreds of thousands of people go missing every year.
Well, we had a guest on last year, didn't we? Precisely this topic.
Maria Wheatley, who's written a whole series of books about disappearances across, in America and the world. And she related.
Maria, was that?
Pardon?
No, that wasn't Maria.
Steph Young.
Stephanie,
Steph Young. Yes,
Okay.
my bad. I misspoke. Steph Young, who, she repeated several stories about people that have had encounters underground with these beings or people hearing their name called. They seem to be lured deeper into these mines and caves, and then they vanish. I mean, there's even people walking in some of these areas in the park systems where, there'll be like three people walking together, and all of a sudden they turn around and, Bob is missing right behind him, and he's never seen again, yet he was right there a moment ago. And it makes you wonder, is something opening in the earth? Is there a portal opening up and these people are getting yanked into it? I mean, and even when people are in the caves or around these areas, they'll have paranormal things happen. Stones appear out of nowhere and appear to be thrown. Disembodied voices that sound like they're right next to you and they're not there. It's more than just, okay, there's a being hiding back deep in the cave waiting to jump on you unexpectedly. They're able to cloak themselves, or they're able to be in a slightly phased out of our reality, for lack of a better way of explaining it.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just the whole idea of these types of beings and creatures. Are we dealing with one type of species? Are we dealing with multiple species that can do this? And
I suppose what we would say is, if they are, not fully flesh and blood, because obviously they're clearly not, if they're doing things that aren't things that we can do flesh and blood, then they don't necessarily have to have a single identity, that they can manifest and appear in certain ways to certain people. Certain ideas that we might have, what we expect to see, can then be fulfilled. For example, if you are in sort of the Rocky Mountains, you expect to see Bigfoot, and that's the sort of thing you sight. But if you're in the countryside in the UK, you're not going to see Bigfoot. You might see like a fairy folk, if you like, some kind of smaller entity, that it's them appearing to us in ways that we understand and make sense to us in terms of our own culture and our own personal history, perhaps.
And we have got the wild man.
Well, there's a few strange people here where I live in this town. I've not seen.
Well,
it's infrequent, isn't it? Say again?
The Woodward, the wild man.
Yeah, okay. I mean, sort of historically, mythologically, you can talk about that, certainly. But not many sightings, not the kind of sheer number of sightings of things like Bigfoot.
I think that so many people over here go out looking for it.
Yeah, true, but they're not. We don't have as really remote locations these sort of things can live and hide in for any real length of time. So we don't tend to see that kind of thing. As far from my own sort of understanding, it tends to be smaller entities, more unusual entities tend to be seen.
But sometimes it seems like these things come in phases, or they appear, in our culture. Brian, you'd mentioned Dogman. Okay, I had never heard of Dogman until the last couple of years, and I always thought it was somebody else trying to come up with their own version of Bigfoot. And yet, there are these reports of not just Dogmen, but all these strange type of upright man-like creatures, hominid creatures that walk on two legs, but they're not Bigfoot. They're variations of these types of creatures. And now those stories are starting to become more popular. Mantis Man, I still kind of have to laugh at that one. But, are we dealing with something that it's a single type of entity that's able to shapeshift, depending on what the public consciousness is? Or are we really dealing with several different types of creatures? Bigfoot got the big press back in the 50s, and became big over the years. But if these other creatures have existed for just as long, and there's a lot of Native American legends, old European legends. I mean, the werewolf story coming out of Europe from years ago, that had to have a basis in fact, or, you know, the legends like that get created. So I guess I'm just trying to say that, where are these stories coming from? Or do these creatures that they hear the whole time, is one more popular, like we have way more Bigfoot than Dogman? Or are we dealing with something that is able to change the way it's perceived when it's visually seen?
I think, you know, I didn't hear about Dogman until about a year ago. I was very versed in Native American lore, shapeshifters, wendigos, that type of creature where you've got something that just has the ability to actually change into anything. You name it, coyotes, eagles, whatever. And it also, there's some that are very vicious and some that are just do it and become a spirit, or they evolve into the spirit. So I don't know where, you know, the Dogman thing came out of, and it is gaining popularity. I just know that I'm taking whatever the history that I know of in the Native American law, who goes back decades, centuries, and going from that, and then from that, we're seeing these things coming to light. There are people that are very well versed and connected that are seeing these things 100%. I mean, they have more to lose than gain when they discuss these creatures. So I don't doubt that they exist. I definitely agree with you that some people are getting better press, and it's the new hype, it's the new, you know, in thing. But these creatures have definitely existed. There is basis throughout history. You can go to multiple cultures, and it may be called Dogman here now, but it's definitely werewolves in Europe. It's the same creature. They have these in Latin America. Wherever you go, there's Bigfoots. Of course, you get the Himalayas with the Yeti. It seems, though, that the Yeti is a lot more aggressive than any type of Bigfoot you would get anyplace else. I mean, most people that see these creatures don't last long if they're that close. They're done. Case in point was that group that went through Russia, and they were all missing.
Back in the 50s,
parts everywhere.
Yeah, I remember that.
That was pretty a scary thing, and I'm thinking right off the bat a Yeti on that one, because of how aggressive this creature is to anything outside of its natural habitat.
Well, but, you know, if you had to live up in the snow all the time, freezing your balls off, and you just want to come in for a little bit of trail mix and they don't share with you, I mean, of course you're going to be cranky.
A couple of Sherpas here and there. I would be aggressive too. But as far as Bigfoot being able, maybe it does adapt itself, or it has abilities where it can cloak itself, kind of like Irene was saying, out of like Predator. And these other creatures have the ability to do that. We don't know. But most of this is based on folklore, and it's pretty interesting to see.
It's again, it's such a fascinating topic, because I mean, there's so many different stories. I mean, even Irene, the story you're telling about what you're seeing in your garden. I mean, was it something visiting? Is there something in the land or the property around the area where you live? I mean, granted, you've only seen them twice, and that was a few years apart.
I am on ley lines, and I did have an investigator working for Spirit Rescue International, and every time there was... she saw these things. Every time she saw these things, within a couple of days there was a disaster, an earthquake, a tornado came through. She was in one of these tornado alley places. Can't remember the name of the state now.
Missouri, Arkansas, Nebraska, somewhere in that area. You know,
yeah.
That's interesting you say that, because that's the type of thing that the cryptid creature Mothman is supposed to be related to, where when he's sighted, that it's always a foretelling of a disaster of some kind.
Yeah, no, every time she saw these kind of creatures, like I say, within a couple of days there would be some disaster somewhere. It was
it's very
Mothman to her.
So it's very Mothman-like, the idea of these particular entities being seen before a disaster occurring, absolutely.
Well, I live on ley lines. The house is built on ley lines. I just hope these buggers aren't living in my garden. If they are,
they're following along the lines.
If they're your garden gnomes, tell them to take care of the hedgehogs.
Yeah. But I wasn't the only one who saw them that night. The dogs saw them as well, because the security lights, when this thing started coming towards me, the security lights went on and the dogs were right down at the bottom of the garden, out of the beam. When I did call the dogs up, the dogs got so far, then they froze and just stood there snarling and growling, looking in my direction. They wouldn't come closer. So they saw it. They knew. But this thing also broke the beam of the security lights.
And it set the lights off.
Yeah.
So it was a physical being. I mean, I was always impressed by what you said, how it appeared to be cloaked, like in the Predator in the movies. Where
But not quite so shimmery as the Predator. But you could see the outline of this thing. You could literally see the outline. But it wasn't shimmering like it was on the television on Predator, you know?
How long did you see it for? How long was it there?
The first time it was only there and close enough, for long enough to walk towards me, and then up went my hand in the fashion of, don't go any further, don't go there.
Yeah.
The second time I allowed the big one to come towards me, and I just stood there, and it seemed like 5 minutes or so, but maybe it wasn't, I don't know.
What did it actually feel like? How were you feeling when you were seeing it?
It just felt like something was being fed into me.
Oh, okay.
Did you have any emotions? Were you afraid or?
No, I was not scared. I wasn't scared, and yet I always thought I would be scared if I saw anything like that, an alien being of any type. Because ghosts I can handle, demons I can handle, but the thought of an alien, no. And I had no fear of it. I had no fear of the first one. In fact, I came in, I was so proud of myself, I punched the air, shouting out, I've seen an alien, I saw an alien off, and I'm dancing around the house.
Are you sure you weren't just looking in the mirror, Irene?
Do you later.
I tend to think of all these different beings as being essentially the same thing. They are manifestations of the same thing.
And I'm wondering if it was the same one, but it'd grown up a bit in those 2 years.
Maybe.
Yeah, you saw it when it was a teenager, and now it's an adult.
Who knows? The first one was about 5 foot tall, slightly smaller than me, and so I'm 5'5", and the second one was it must have been about 6.5 foot, easy.
Something that's kind of related to this phenomenon is the people who see like the lights in the woods in these locations. And I've told this story before about a Bigfoot hunter in Ohio, Tim Stover, who called me up one night freaking out because he's not a paranormal guy. I mean, he had a Bigfoot encounter 20 years ago. He goes out all the time since. He's been looking for it again. He's got some interesting evidence, and he shoots a lot of video. And he called me up one night while he was still in the woods. He had cell phone reception, freaking out because he was standing there in the woods and this ball of light came out of the woods and floated right up and hovered right in front of his face for about a minute.
Yeah, well, there's been reports like that in a lot of airwoods over here as well. Lights.
Can I tell you a very quick story that you might find fascinating?
Hang on a second, Andy. There's a little bit more to it than you chime in.
Go.
He said it was in front of his face, and so I started asking questions. I'm going, well, how did you feel? How did it make you feel? And he goes, well, I guess I was feeling very calm and peaceful. And then he said he stared at it for about a minute, and then he had his camera with him, so he reached down to grab his camera to take a picture, and then it just boom, vanished. And he goes, when it disappeared, it was like that link was broken, and that's when he became afraid and freaked out. And then he knew I was the paranormal guy, so he called me up, still in the woods, just a minute after it happened. But when, like what Irene said, when she saw her creatures, when this thing was floating in front of him, it had a feeling of peace from it. It wasn't until he reached for the camera that it decided didn't want a picture taken. It winked out, and that's when his fear rushed in.
Absolutely. Well, interestingly, without going into the whole background story, one of the things I'm fascinated by is called the Dyatlov Pass incident, which happened in Russia in 1959, where a number of very experienced ski tourists, as they were called, were hiking in the mountains, and a few of them, well, basically, they died under strange circumstances. It's another story for another show. But one of the guys who's done a lot of research, a guy called Ken McCloskey, came across two stories from the early 2000s of people who were working in the Ural Mountains who had very strange experiences with lights, anomalous lights they're seeing in the sky and in the woods around them. He observed a bright yellowy white light that was moving towards him in the middle of the night in a forest setting where he was working near the mines in the area, and he was out on patrol, late night patrol, looking for mines, guarding the mine, I should say. And he saw these yellow bright lights coming towards him. Now, he's armed, he's a security guard, in the middle of the night, and he was actually quite frightened by them. Now, he'd worked out in the woods for years, he knew all sorts of strange noises and sounds, he could identify them, but these lights actually scared him. He said, I don't know why, I just wanted to run the hell away from them. Now, this report appeared in a local newspaper, and another guy who had a similar experience a couple of years before got in contact with the security guy and said, I'd had the same experience. I live and work in the woods, this other guy was saying, and I've been out there for years. I track at night, and I quite enjoy doing that. But I, too, had a similar experience of a bright yellowy white light that seemed to move through the trees towards me. And although I, again, was armed with a knife and a shotgun, a rifle, rather, I was completely spooked by these lights. I just had to get the hell away from them. And what's been suggested was that perhaps the Dyatlov Pass kids actually saw these strange lights because it wasn't very far from where they were camped, albeit a number of years earlier, and were basically spooked to hell by these lights because they said it wasn't just the fact you could see the lights in the woods. They said that was one thing, but there was a feeling coming from the light that absolutely scared him. And despite both being experienced of working in the woods at night in the Ural Mountains, both guys said they just couldn't stay. They had to get away from these lights. They were scared by them. And they said there was nothing they could say particularly about the lights other than the feeling that came from the lights. So
did they have any missing time? Did they have any missing time at all, or have they been regressed to find out what might have gone on?
I don't know about the second question. As far as I know, the first one, there was no loss of time, but it was just a sense that there was something of these lights that was scaring them. But they were both quite clear. The lights were in the woods. They weren't flying above. They weren't like spacecraft, whatever, coming down. They were in amongst the trees and moving through the trees towards them.
These lights are like a plasma ball. They're
exactly,
they're
that
not
kind of thing.
Yeah, they could be as small as a baseball. They could be as big as a soccer ball. I've heard a lot of stories. There's the famous case of the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, and the owner had instances with these balls of light that were very malignant, and in fact, it killed his dogs. And then in North Carolina, there's the Brownsville lights in the mountains in North Carolina. They're famous. People go out to this location to watch these lights at dusk come up all the time and float around the base of the mountain and in the forest. In Romania, in the Hiobaciu forest in Transylvania, there's that the woods around the Hiobaciu forest and the circle, the big circle where nothing grows. And many investigators and people in that area have gone in there. A couple of television shows have gone in there. And they film these lights, like red lights and other types of lights, coming in and out of the woods. And they all have very intense paranormal experiences with them.
Yeah, absolutely. There's got to be a parallel there. There's got to be some kind of connection between these light anomalies and, again, the underground beings we're talking about, as if they're almost like a manifestation of the same thing. Absolutely.
Yeah, we had that at Nuclear Lake as well. All the lights and missing time. It was very interesting.
We're having so much fun, but shutting, I'm afraid.
Yeah, we've come to the end.
It's orders too.
Ding, ding, the bell's gone.
See, this is why I love doing these shows, when we're able to share these stories and experiences and share ideas while, drinking our pints and eating our crisps.
And getting half cut, yeah.
Yep.
And I've just seen Erica Bora squaring up to James Randigate, so I think we need to get out of here before it gets a little bit hairy.
No, yeah, we don't want to deal with those two. No. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on and joining us here at the pub, and we will have to do this again.
Absolutely.
We will.
Thank you.
Yeah, well...
Remember to take your glasses back to the bar, please.
It's becoming quite a thing with us, this pub, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, do you want to take us out then, Mark?
Oh, sure. Everybody, thank you for listening to another episode of Paranormal UK Radio. Again, catch us on our podcasts on TuneIn, Stitcher, iTunes. You can catch us everywhere. Go to paranormalukradio.com for more information. And again, guys, we can't wait to have all of your shows broadcast this month, too.
Cool.
Absolutely. Working on it now, doing all the editing.
All right.
Okay,
Now,
thank you, everybody.
okay, everybody, ready? Dine and dash, go!
Go!